Why? Oh dear, yeah. Shall we go over that row over there? Is that row empty? Is that row empty?
Okay, I'll come on and just a minute.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock and time to reopen this inquiry. Can everybody hear me?
No.
Anyone got anything to hand in?
From the operators of the Curzon Cinema, which was received on Monday and which was circulated to parties then, but I have one copy.
I don't know if you can a copy of each. So you can come back and you can use it to circulate as well. It's a little late, but is everybody content for me to take away and look at it? Or does want to do this or do you want to say something about it?
Yeah, well,
In terms of the inquiry documents,
Yes, I've given them, apologies if they're not on the version that was handed to you. I've given the one that is of the south elevation ASE/0/25, the email from Curzon being /24.
okay. At the site visit, I was given this plan of places to go and look at. I presume the council prepared it. Nobody knows. Did you not prepare it?
No, I think we prepared it.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Could you add it to the bottom of your appearances, of your list, please?
Yeah, I think it's on our...
I think ONCI asked me to go and look at the student accommodation development at the Maltings King Edward's Quay. Am I right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, in what context was I going to look at it?
We wanted to discern the character of the area as resulting from the fact that our argument that student accommodation doesn't necessarily generate a high level of footfall.
Right, okay. Anyone else who wishes to hand in?
I've got copies of the representations that have been submitted during the course of the inquiry for you and the relevant parties. I can distribute those now if you wish.
Please.
So there is one further hand in. It's a note that we prepared. There's, I think it's going to be presented, or we already have been presented with two completed versions of condition 50. It's a note just to explain why there are differences between civic and why we recommend one over the other to you. So that's ASE/0.
Can't hear.
ASE/0/27. It's 2A apparently now.
Sorry, 27 was the state of common ground and student accommodation.
This bundle, is this what's come to the council? So they haven't gone through Finn's office, is that right?
My understanding is that was documentation that was submitted during the course of the inquiry.
Oh, no.
You asked for
I
representations.
think I've got them all already. We had a conversation last week and sorted them all out. Yeah. I think I asked during the course of the inquiry for a plan that showed the location of halls of residence and the actual location of the students or the tertiary educational establishments that would be used by students, with sort of an indication of the accommodation, how many people were living in different locations, and also how many students were attending classes at different locations. Was anybody able to provide that?
I think you had that, sir.
Did we?
It was document ASC/0/10.
Just one final thing then. Council might be the best source of this, certainly in the first instance. Would it it be possible to provide me with a 1 to 250 ordnance survey plan of the area between the access to Queen Street and St Botolph's Church? And the site visit, the benefit of third parties, the question of, there is a view of St Botolph's Church from First Sight Square, and I really want to sort of try to establish whether or not that view is going to be retained or whether development's going to obliterate it. That's why I want to measure all that. Housing land supply. Do we need to discuss anything, or is it all perfectly clear for me to take away and read?
I'll just explain it for the benefit of members of the public as much as anything else. What's been agreed is that for the purposes of this exercise, we're looking at a 5-year period starting April 2019 and ending in March 2014. And as far as the requirement is concerned, there's a very clear-cut agreement that the 5-year housing land supply requirement is 5701. And there's a detailed explanation of that, and that's all agreed. And it's on the supply side, there's an element of dispute. The dispute in relation to the supply side focuses really on the 3 sites that were canvassed in the ground table session. And the housing land supply sets that out. There's a caveat entered by the appellant in relation to the timing of the evidence and that kind of thing. But you'll see for yourself what the statement sets out.
All right, thanks very much. What about student accommodation? There is a statement on the ground that you should have a copy of. The key thing to look at is 3536 in the table that follows, which is on page 3.4, current position. And you see there from the figures first from 3.5, current position is summarised below. Data for rows A and B is taken from HESA data. Data for rows D and E is taken from table 1 and paragraph 3.1 above. Council and rules of parties intend to accept the data in those rows. So those are accepted. 3.6, the information in row A is supplied by the appellant. The council is unable to agree or disagree with this figure and is unable to offer any alternative information. And the rules of party does not dispute. So we have agreement in relation to 3 of the rows. We have neither agreement nor disagreement from the council in relation to the row A. And we have agreement from the Rule 6 party in relation to row A. The key figures in the total Colchester column at the end are students seeking accommodation 9,848 and total current purpose block provision 6272. The difference between those 2 figures being the shortfall. So you almost have agreement on everything, but you don't have disagreement on anything. Okay, we're going to still now.
I should say, because I'll come to it in clothing, I should say, to my mind, there's some limitations about this particular statement of common ground, because A, it doesn't do 2 things. You can only agree what's in the number 1, it doesn't deal with the key point about the difference between the present position and the immediate future position of 24, I think it's 24-25, which is reflected in it doesn't deal with that, and it doesn't deal with the Colchester PBSA occupation compared with the national PBSA occupation position.
That's an evidence.
So that's an evidence.
Yeah.
All I'm saying, there are always limits to statements of common.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well thank you for that. Finally, did I get a list of appearances from the council?
Yes.
I did. Sorry?
Would you like another?
Yeah, I couldn't find it. You could reference it in your list of documents. Let me have one, please. Would be helpful. Can I just ask each of the parties to update their inquiry documents and let me, you can email it to Pins, it doesn't have to be done today, and just let me have a final document of what you've submitted. It would be very helpful. Similarly, can I have an emailed version of the conditions as have been agreed? And finally, could I have an email version electronically of the proposal submission? Today. Well, yes, please. Oh, yeah, please. Yeah, everything needs to be in Word or in corrupt decision template. Right, anybody wish to raise anything else? Yeah?
So are we able to, I was under the impression, not a verbal statement, but to hand in a final document of a single sheet of A4?
You can, providing the three barristers agree that it's okay. I mean, depending on what you're saying, they might want an adjournment to look at it and make representations. If it's only saying what you've said already,
It's wrapping up in one sheet of A4, so.
Two in my case. So
Two in
no
my
objection provided what you say in advance, that there's no new evidence.
yeah, that's right. I mean, if you're not, if everything you're saying has been talked about, I've not got an issue. Yeah.
Does anyone who's sitting around this...
Can you speak up a bit?
Does anyone who is sitting around this table now have any conflict of interest in this appeal?
I'm not sure what you mean by conflict of interest. I mean, I might have a conflict of interest in appeals, but I don't.
This particular appeal, does anyone sitting here now have a conflict of professional interest in this appeal?
Why would anybody other than potentially myself have a conflict of interest?
Does anyone have any investment or particular interest in supporting this appeal who should be independent for the people of Colchester, representing the people of Colchester?
Well, if you're asking me, the answer is no.
Okay.
I'm not, but I am asking if anyone feels that they are conflicted to own up.
Given that there's only me making the decision, I'm at a loss to understand why anyone else would have a conflict of interest, because anybody, any member of the public is potentially able to come here and give evidence, they have a right to do that.
Even if that evidence may be conflicted with them. Thank you very
But if
much.
that evidence is conflicting, then during the course of the inquiry, somebody should have said, he may be saying that, but, he's coming from, if you like, this angle. I mean, as far as I'm aware, nobody has.
Well, if everybody has a clean conscience, then fine. I suspect otherwise. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, well, I'm going to move on to closing. I'm going to go on to closing submissions. Can I have just a brief estimate as to how much time you take and what I'll hold you to the minute?
So I have adhered to the mandate and the original. I would have been more than an hour, but I will be as a result of that an hour.
Now, okay. Mr. Pickles?
Half an hour.
All right. Mr. Lewis?
About 40 minutes, I think so.
Right, I'll say 40 minutes.
Okay, so is everybody content that we then just go through it all? We don't have a break in the middle. I'm quite happy to have a break if people want to go and get a coffee or whatever.
We'll see how you feel after the council submission.
All right, okay, all right. We'll hold that in abeyance then.
So I'm reminded that we have an almost complete section 106. It's not yet signed.
Yes, can I just update you on it? It might be relevant for programming today.
It will.
We have the agreements engrossed, they're all ready to be signed. Unfortunately, the director of the appellant who is executing the deed has been delayed on the trains. He is on his way, he is going to be here this morning. The intention is for him to sign and then for the engrossements to immediately be passed over to the council to arrange for senior and completion. We are optimistic this will all happen today before closing submissions are finished, but we can update you on that as we go. And perhaps in exceptional circumstances
so that you're aware, and you may already be aware, that the two material changes to Section 106 relate to the public realm part of the site between Southgate and Berryfields. That's the first point. And the second is a requirement that any students that occupy the student accommodation, if the proposal goes ahead, be bound to provide copies within their lease a restriction preventing any use of a car or parking of a car within a kilometre parking. Yes. Yeah. It is. Right. Is it you to go first, Mr. Pickles, or Mr. Lewis? Mr. Lewis?
I was expected to go first, and I'm quite happy to do so if that's convenient.
Yeah, that's fine, I mean.
And if people would like to distribute spare copies amongst themselves, I'll take go. Share if they don't stretch all the way. So these are my posted submissions on behalf of OMCI Investments Limited, the interested party. As I set out in paragraph 1, they are structured in accordance with the main issue for the decision as identified by your good self at the beginning of the inquiry. I won't read that paragraph out, but I'll start straight off with issue number 1, which is whether the consultation undertaken by the appellant met the requirements of paragraph 128 of the NPPF. So my initial submission is that OMCI agrees with the Council that this issue doesn't amount of itself to a freestanding reason for refusal, but OMCI's essential point on this aspect is that effective and responsive consultation, which takes proper account of the views of the community, contributes to achieving good design in the context of the objectives of the NPPF. As set out in Ms. Oldham's evidence, various concerns expressed by the community, such as the poor balance of uses, the enclosed feel of the development and its lack of openness, lack of space around first sight, the inappropriate appearance, density and height of the development, along with an absence of suitable parking, including blue badge parking provision, these aspects were seemingly overlooked by the appellant. At all events, they certainly weren't responded to in the appellant's consideration of redesign options. While the appeal proposals may have been revised to take account of views expressed by Historic England and officers of the Council, the opportunity was missed to reconcile, in the words of Para 128, to reconcile the proposals with the community's concerns, forgive me, as referred to in the NPPF. It was put to Ms. Oldham in cross-examination that the appellant couldn't very well be criticised for deferring to Historic England and Council officers in amending the design of the proposals. But so in my submission, that's to miss the point that the design proposals were simply not adequately informed by the principled and justifiable planning concerns expressed by the community throughout the consultation, in inverted commas, process. As Ms. Oldham points out, the lack of effective community engagement concerning the appeal proposals is best evidenced by the sustained community resistance to them. As she said, this is symptomatic of a series of missed opportunities on the part of the appellant to revise their proposals in line with principles of good design and to respond to feedback from the local community which call for those standards to be respected. Simply listing the comments of third parties, as was set out in the appellant's SOCI documentation, isn't the same as taking account of and reconciling the design with locals' concerns, as is advocated in the NPPF, such as to say by publishing a reasoned and considered response of part of any statement of community involvement. It follows, sir, that the appellant's designs can't lay claim to the more favourable, in the wording of the NPPF, the more favourable consideration referred to in Para 128. As Ms. Ullman said, in response to cross-examination, your question about this, well, where does all this get us? This failure on the appellant's part is a material consideration to weigh in the scales. It's another opportunity missed to develop or to evolve a truly community-focused proposal. Again, so this isn't simply a matter in respect to which the appellant can maintain that interested parties can't contend their prejudice by this failing, by the appellant saying that they have their chance to voice their criticisms in this inquiry. In my submission, so it's a failure to observe an express commendation of effective consultation, which has constantly been enshrined in national policy in the NPPF. Indeed, sir, it appears that a key consequence of the appellant's lack of effective consultation is that the scheme hasn't been changed to reflect legitimate concerns, being an unsatisfactory position which the planning committee of the council quite rightly rejected. Additionally, sir, the appellant can't claim credit for engaging with existing businesses either, especially if the business questionnaire is anything to go by. As I pointed out in cross-examination of Mr. Writer, the lack of reference to the retail floor space in that questionnaire being proposed is conspicuous in its absence in that regard. So that's what I have to say about issue 1. Issue 2, the effect on the character appearance of the surrounding area in the accordance with proposals with the master plan. As I've referred to already, and I go on to say below, the bulk, scale and mass of the proposed buildings would dominate and compete with, rather than complementing their surroundings. Despite attempts by the appellant to step back or break up blocks of development, the overall impression is one of a uniform, homogeneous, oversized development which presents a monolithic appearance, emphasised by the use of these flat roofs in various key viewpoints. The proposals fail to accord with the St Botolph's Quarter Master Plan in numerous respects, as set out in OMCI's evidence. In particular, sir, the mass and scale of the development exceeds the principle in the master plan that building height should be in keeping with the predominantly 3- and 4-storey character of Colchester. Also, as shown in Ms. Alderman's evidence, the layout and massing varies significantly from the original master plan proposals, including losing the central square where the north, south and east, west routes would have intersected, in not successfully realising the main pedestrian routes north, south and east, west, and key views along them, and in failing to re-establish the curvature of Queen Street. Also, as shown in Ms. Alderman's evidence, as was debated in cross-examination, First Sight maintained a greater separation between itself and the northeasternmost, what was the retail residential element to the west in the master plan, and the appellant's block A now comes closer to First Sight than shown there in the master plan. I give you a cross reference in Mr. Carr, the council's witness to that same point. As set out in Mr. Buist's evidence, the appeal proposals fail to meet the master plan's overriding aim to create a high-quality public realm. That paragraph goes on. It says, this means high-quality design, construction and maintenance, as well as routes and places that are used, enjoyed and respected by all. As described by Mr. Buist, the unclear and impermeable walking routes and the remnant bus depot with its truncated rear-end wall, they're as barriers to integration of the appeal site with its surroundings, resulting in anti-connective dead ends, contrary to the objectives of the plan, and that of walkability principally set out in that plan. The provision of attractive and usable areas of public realm is a further matter which arose during the inquiry. Here, the appellants sought to make much of First Sight Square and John Wall squares in this context. As revealed in the inquiry, First Sight Square has effectively been provided bordered to the north by the boundary of the Minories, First Sight to the east, and Curzon Cinema with a through route to the west, but of course currently open to the south. The appellant's approach is to insert a large 4- to 5-storey monolithic
institutional block on this southern aspect. This would not only heavily overshadow and overbear the space, but with its 4-5-story presence, would also visually conflict with the iconic first site building by ramping up above it and appearing uncomfortably close, as shown, for instance, I give you the cross-reference there to the design and access statement, sir, but handed in this morning, I've just asked you to add that in, and plan ASE/0/26. ASE, forgive me, /0/26. That one, so if you have this morning. Whilst the concept behind John Wall Square may have some logic to it, at least if properly forming part of a through route through development, the reality experienced on the ground would be very different. The exclusion and retention of the main part of the bus depot to the west would seal off any aspect or any access or open aspect to the western flank. Presumably some sort of screen wall would be needed to the unresolved northern end of the square. To the south, the continuation of the existing height of the town wall, which would be well above head height in this location, would additionally enclose and overshadow the space. The end product would effectively be a dead end and an overshadowed area, remembering more of a service yard space than a vital and pleasant piece of public ground. Despite the extensive evidence in Ms. Oldham and Mr. Buist's proofs on this question, Ms. Oldham was challenged in her cross-examination to identify the respects in which the appeal proposals have failed to capture the master plan's key guiding principles that she had set out in her proof. And the factors she listed were those requiring high-quality design, I think the cross-reference there to high-quality design in an urban context, and the need for the development to recognise the importance of the quality of its setting. Second matter she raised was routes, spaces and views. And this cross referred to the urban codes diagram in the document and indeed the aerial view on page 15 of the plan. Public access was another matter she mentioned, with disabled access in her phrase being paramount in that respect. That corresponds exactly to the passage I give you there from the plan. The overriding aim of the master plan is to create a high-quality public realm for the St. Botolph water. Disabled access throughout the master plan is an overriding consideration. Again, she referred to the importance of ensuring vitality and viability. I'll give you the cross-references for that in the master plan, where that same important objective came from. Skipping down to pedestrian footfall, the next matter she mentioned. And again, there's a cross-reference there. The issue of economic sustainability is addressed through accommodation design that encourages a good distribution of activity in terms of footfall throughout the area and a careful land use strategy that matches pedestrian-sensitive uses to areas where high activity levels are envisaged. Now, the master plan proposes a mix of uses to create a sustainable development of new cultural, retail, residential and visitor facilities so as to be an attractive, safe, vibrant, walkable and integrated part of Colchester town centre. Again, stated in the master plan, an appropriate mix of uses is key to the area's vitality. In the light of the above, OMCI maintains that the appeal proposals would simply fail to do this, particularly from the point of view of proposing an over-concentration of student accommodation in buildings which are too large and massive so as to dominate rather than complement their surroundings. As I put it to Mr. Wrighton in my cross-examination of him, this is a function of the appellants seeking to fit in such a large quantum of development on the appeal site, with the consequences that plot coverage increased and building heights were raised compared with what was contemplated in the master plan. Or indeed, to adopt Sir Bob Russell's memorable phrase, in effect the appellant is trying to fit a quart into a pint pot. It isn't enough to say, sir, as both Mr. Escott and Mr. Wrighton sought to, that the master plan advocated narrow routes, quoting from the plan.
Nevertheless, quite clear that what the master plan has in mind in that respect is what's shown on the urban codes diagram and in the aerial view within the master plan. In any event, sir, what's proposed by the appellant, there's no comparison to Priory Walk, mentioned by Mr. Escott, which was prayed in aid at one point by him as a reference point. Moreover, sir, the appellant's narrow lanes exhibit the problems of their own, identified by Mr. Buist in the round table session, when he pointed out the inherent tension
between maintaining privacy in ground floor student rooms, which is now intervening standoff planting, further narrowing the lanes, and its conflict between having ground floor student rooms and presenting active frontages. But ultimately, so the biggest failure of the appeal proposals against the objectives of the master plan
is their lack of design quality, measured against the standard set both by the area's context, in a conservation area of exceptional value and significance, and one where development over the balance of the site needs to recognise the importance and quality of its setting. And again, sir, the vision is set out in the master plan as being the function of the area of the master plan to guide the sustainable development of Colchester town centre in a way that recognises the immense historic value of its heritage. As I submitted in opening, sir, an exceptional area such as St. Botolph calls for an exceptional response. And so this point was echoed in Ms. Parsons' evidence for the council in her observation in her evidence in chief, which I know wasn't disputed in cross-examination, that the area we're dealing with, sir, is a very special location which demands a very special development. Regrettably, however, the appellant's proposals for the area don't aspire to, let alone meet, with the requisite standard as established by the guiding principles in the master plan. This is another major failing of the proposals before the inquiry. Issue 3, sir, the extent of harm to the character and appearance of the conservation area and the other heritage assets within it. In common with the council, sir, OMCI maintains the appeal proposals would cause harm to the character and appearance of the conservation area and the other high-value heritage assets which form an integral part of it. The degree of that harm would be less than substantial in the terms of paragraph 196 of the MPPF, and, as Ms. Ullman said, towards the mid-end of the range, she said in her evidence, comparing with that the council's closely comparable assessment in Mr. Morley's proof, he said the level of harm would be nearer to the middle of the scale and less than substantial, due to both the number of the very high significance of the heritage assets that would be harmed by the appeal proposal. Dr. Burgess, the appellant, on the other hand, sir, is in a minority of one in claiming that not only would there be no harm to heritage assets, but that improvements to the condition of the existing appeal site would balance out not as harm but as a positive benefit. Now, I say that Dr. Burgess was in a minority of one, because not even officers of the council in recommending approval of the appeal application found there to be no harm. You can cross-reference in the committee report for that, and that's despite Historic England's, what I say is surprising conclusion. I'm going to come back to this in due course.
Not surprising, despite recording Historic England's surprising conclusion in their representations on the appeal of the appeal proposals not now causing harm. But it's also to be observed that the council officers didn't go so far as to see any benefit in the proposals, seemingly only being guided by Historic England. Likewise, Landpro, that's the people who conducted the initial and revised heritage statements on behalf of the appellant. Landpro, while balancing harm against positive effects, nevertheless formed the view that the impacts of the appeal proposals would equate with less than substantial harm to the significance of the heritage assets identified. Now, in cross-examination, Dr. Burgess sought to maintain that Landpro's overall conclusion in the round was broadly positive. Although, sir, as you yourself were given to remark in the course of my questioning, Dr. Burgess could really only answer no to the question I put to him. The paragraph, the reference paragraph in the Lambert report didn't reach a positive conclusion as to any enhancement. So that's why, sir.
But homing in on paragraph 45 on page 10 of my closing submission, making the general point, sir, that of those 20 items enumerated, almost all of these same benefits would arise from a policy-compliant scheme of redevelopment of the appeal site, and so are not unique to the appeal proposal. Ms. Orman also queried certain items such as spending by students, who she pointed out would already be in the town. And in any event, she questions the extent of the need for new student accommodation in the town, as confirmed in her contribution to the round table session, and indeed whether further provision will have the effect of freeing up existing rented housing as set out in her proof. She did accept that limited, in her words, public benefits would arise in the form of contributing to housing targets and economic benefit arising from the construction of any units. Likewise, she was prepared to accept in cross-examination that limited benefit would arise in the form of the two matters just mentioned, and a combined benefit with the provision of a hotel, the commercial units, and achieving development, albeit so that she didn't accept the site was particularly negative. She continued to query whether the satisfaction of student need, she continued to query the satisfaction of student need as a benefit, and whether in any event that represented additional spend. It was put her in cross-examination that there was a co-location benefit in having the development close to the Curzon Cinema on the town wall. What Ms. Orman said was that was compromised by the overdevelopment of the appeal site.
So in response to questions in cross-examination, and indeed from your good self, Ms. Orman maintained that she didn't find the present condition of the appeal site to be negative. She accepted that the area needed to be redeveloped, but that was in the context of the need for regeneration in accordance with the principles in the master plan. But her consistent theme on that aspect was that one shouldn't be
settling for something which didn't meet those requirements and which didn't reflect the special sensitivity and importance of the area. As Ms. Orman said, this isn't an area where the notion of it'll do will suffice. The extent of harm to the conservation area and the numerous high-grade listed buildings which form such an integral part of it is very much a matter for your judgment, sir. But OMCI maintains that, having regard to the inevitable prominence and intrusiveness in views of the large-scale monolithic masses of the proposed development, the medium degree of less substantial harm to the settings of those heritage assets is inevitable. The proximity of the appeal proposal to key heritage assets will also be a matter which you, sir, will no doubt take carefully into account, especially when viewed from the Minories, its summer house, East Hill House curtilage and Greyfriars. The close distance involved would hardly amount to a distant urban black backcloth, seems to be suggested by Dr. Burgess. On the contrary, the proposed blocks would be close and very noticeable, requiring a much more sympathetic design and visual relationship with this most important conservation area. And again, putting the cross-reference in there, sir, recalling so that public accessibility isn't a critical criterion in this regard. And again, I gave you the cross-reference in Historic England setting guidance to that point. So that's what I have to say on harm to the conservation area. Next issue, the public benefits proposal and the extent to which they might outweigh harm to heritage assets. Now, in opening, so I'm grateful to Mr. Wall for this. He enumerated 20 matters as representing benefits, economic, social and environmental, which the appellants saw as flowing for the appeal proposals on which they rely.
In the circumstances, But again, in that context, they have to rely inevitably, as OMCI and the council would say, there in the event that inevitably you find that the appeal proposals would cause harm to the heritage assets. And again, the benefits of the forest, and I say I'm grateful to Mr. Wall for allowing me to cut and paste his opening to do this, to save my typing fingers in the list. I'm not going to read all of those out, so you've got them in Mr. Wall's opening, and you've now got them in my closing speech.
But homing in on paragraph 45 on page 10 of my closing submission, making the general point, sir, that of those 20 items enumerated, almost all of these same benefits would arise from a policy-compliant scheme of redevelopment of the appeal site, and so are not unique to the appeal proposals. Ms. Orman also queried certain items such as spending by students, who she pointed out would already be in the town. And in any event, she questions the extent of the need for new student accommodation in the town, as confirmed in her contribution to the round table session, and indeed whether further provision will have the effect of freeing up existing rented housing, as set out in her proof. She did accept that limited, in her words, public benefits would arise in the form of contributing to housing targets, and economic benefit arising from the construction of any units. Likewise, she wasn't prepared to accept in cross-examination that limited benefit would arise in the form of the two matters just mentioned, and a combined benefit with the provision of a hotel, the commercial units, and achieving development, albeit so that she didn't accept the site as particularly negative. She continued to query whether the satisfaction of student need, she continued to query the satisfaction of student need as a benefit, and whether in any event that represented additional spend. It was put her in cross-examination that there was a co-location benefit in having the development close to the Curzon Cinema on the town wall. What Ms. Orman said was that that was compromised by the overdevelopment of the appeal site.
Again, Ms. Orman's stance was such benefits would be better delivered by a genuinely high-quality scheme for the site, so that any weight to be attributed to contended for benefits is necessarily reduced. As set out in her evidence, it's the social and environmental impacts of this development overall which she regarded as the most negative aspects of the scheme. As she explained in her evidence, the public benefit of the proposed heritage trail and rampart walk were markedly reduced by the fact that the area would comprise an impermeable student quarter in most other respects. In the light of the above, therefore, and in the context of Para 196 of the MPPF, OMCI submits that the harm which would be caused to the relevant heritage assets would not be outweighed by any public benefits of the scheme. A related question arising under this heading was raised by you, sir, as to what the implications of not proceeding with the scheme would be. OMCI's primary point under this head is that the current appeal scheme would in any manner of means represent a lost opportunity on the appeal site and or Colchester town in general, and therefore with respect, sir, in my respectful submission, you should have no qualms about rejecting it. In those circumstances, as Ms. Parsons stated in her evidence, the appellant could review the basis on which the appeal was dismissed and then take a view on how to address that. Or indeed, the council could simply go back to the market again and seek another developer partner. Now, despite Mr. Wrighton saying in his rebuttal proof that there are no viable alternatives before this inquiry, he accepted in cross-examination by me that OMCI could fill that role.
As indeed they are ready, willing and able to do. In fact, sir, OMCI has delivered and is in the course of implementing several regeneration initiatives in the area at Greyfriars, at East Hill House and Lewis Gardens, all of which you've seen, sir. And no doubt you'll have observed from your site visit that these developments have something in common. That's to say, they are high-quality, exemplar schemes And the same approach would and should be applied to the appeal side. And I'm asked particularly, so just before you do turn over the page there, by Mr. Lawson, to mention the fact of the extensive provision for disabled persons within both Greyfriars, as is contemplated in East Hill House, and never forgetting, sir, you'll have seen this on your site visit, the provision which there is for disabled persons just outside First Site.
Thanks.
So going over the page and just rounding off this issue. Respectfully submit, therefore, that you, sir, should not be unduly troubled by the consequences of dismissing the appeal, least of all from the point of view of preventing enduring harm to the conservation area and the important heritage assets forming an integral part of it. So it's a fifth issue, originally formulated as designed for proposed access ramp, but treat it as proposals for forming a southern access to the appeal site. Now, so generally speaking, it doesn't seem that the appeal application ramp option is a matter which can still seriously be pursued. But despite what would seem to be this obvious state of affairs, and reinforced by the factual background drawn attention to by Mr. Pickles in cross-examination of Mr. Writing, as a writer as to what went on in committee, you'll remember the extract of the minutes there, which I used the cross-references to. So, despite all of that, Mr. Shields, in his evidence, the appellant, persisted in advocating the merits of the ramp option in the round table session which we had on design. But self-evidently, sir, in my respectful submission, it's a dead duck. But it's nevertheless one which the appellant seems determined to keep in play, presumably as an alternative to the also dubious lift option. In my respectful submission, sir, this is symptomatic of the tendency of the appellant to keep pressing ahead with an option despite its drawbacks, in hopes of nevertheless obtaining a favourable outcome. I'll go on to mention the same point further below. ONCI, sir, initially was agnostic about the extent to which the lift option might be acceptable. As Ms. Ullman says in her proof of evidence, she continues to express wider concerns about the fact that the appeal scheme as a whole doesn't embrace the principles of inclusive design, particularly from the point of view of access to disabled people. The fact of the matter is that a lift option wouldn't be likely to function well enough to ensure that the southwest corner of the development was adequately accessible to people such as wheelchair users. And again, there's the pertinent discussion recorded in the committee minutes. Indeed, sir, the evidence of Councillor Rockford and Ms. Macaulay as to the difficulty of negotiating Queen Street in a wheelchair eloquently highlighted the very issue with the accessibility of the appeal site alignment here. Just because some wheelchair users might be forced in the current situation to make their way all the way up Queen Street from the Priory Street car park to the Curtin Street cinema, that doesn't mean that it's acceptable for all wheelchair users wishing to access the appeal site from the car park should have to make their way in via Queen Street too. So, in answer to your question, sir, whether the southern access was really needed at all, OMCI certainly maintains that the answer to that question is an emphatic yes. Now, Mr. Wrighton conceded in cross-examination by Mr. Pickles that the southern access was indeed necessary. At one point in cross-examination by myself, it seemed that he was prepared to agree that it was also essential. But nonetheless, in what he obviously regarded as the safe port of re-examination, he next sought to suggest that you, sir, could nonetheless appropriately grant planning permission for the appeal proposals even without a southern access from Priory Street to John Ball Square. Telling me, sir, what Mr. Wrighton said was that the remainder of the appeal scheme would nevertheless be acceptable even without the southern access, because this would be another of the aspects which can't achieve. So once again, sir, this is the opposite saying, well, here's a constraint, we can't overcome it, so we're going to press on with what we wanted to do anyway. But despite all that, sir, rather goes without saying that the southern access over the town wall is an express and direct requirement for walkability and permeability of St. Botolph's quarter, with access to disabled persons being an overriding consideration in that context of the master plan. We can do the cross-references for those remarks.
The access point is a necessary component of the heritage route north from the Priory. It should be noted that, when it suited, but it was regarded and presented by the appellants as one of the principal public realm opportunities which the appeal proposals would bring with them. These are the cross-references for those in the evidence.
But of course, without it, John Ball Square would just be another dead end of the development without it. And so on OMCI's behalf, I therefore repeat and maintain that the appeal proposals can't be permitted without including the necessary, or in Mr. Pickle's word, or essential in my word, southern access, which for so long has formed part of the key principles of the master plan. And indeed, sir, it was the issues over the accessibility of the access which led OMCI to question the true inclusivity of the appeal proposals. OMCI's concerns are corroborated by the trenchant observation made by Mr. Macaulay that the car-free restriction on occupation of the appeal development amounted to a declaration that wheelchair user students need not apply for a place within it. Again, sir, this is why Ms. Oldham felt that the appeal proposal should, of necessity, and despite the general benefit of keeping the town centre car-free, nonetheless, she said, the appeal proposal should include an element of dedicated car parking with it. So it follows from that, of necessity, an adequate and effective means of ensuring access for all potential users over the town wall must be secured as a prerequisite of any planning permission for the appeal proposals. But therefore, sir, to provide for a truly inclusive and sustainable form of development on the site, appropriate blue badge and parking provision should properly be incorporated into the development as it was part of it. Merely nominal provision of one blue badge space shared with servicing and relying as well on off-site parking in Priory Street, but with no guarantee of availability for a long circuitous route is simply not adequate in the context of inclusive new build development, and therefore remains at odds with paragraph 127F of the NPPF.
So, on OMCI's behalf, so I submit that inclusivity is a highly material planning consideration
which should carry great weight in this appeal, and so much so that the inadequate proposals in the appeal scheme shouldn't be countenanced when planning for the development of this sensitive site, where again access for disabled persons is an overriding consideration. So finally, sir, under this heading, and for the avoidance of any doubt, OMCI doesn't accept the resolution of the detail of a lift version or some southern access as a matter which can be left over for resolution by condition in the future. So this is in line with the advice about not sanctioning changes between permission completion in para 130 of the NPPF and the advice in the NPPG about not imposing conditions unless there are prospects for their requirements being met within the lifetime of the permission. A couple of thoughts to weave in there. So there's also the general principle. I couldn't find it on going back through the NPPF, to be honest. But it always used to be said that one doesn't have an outline application, or one shouldn't have an outline application in a conservation area in order to ensure that one knows what the details will be. Yes, so praying that similar point in aid, and also the point in the PPG about not allowing what may be significant changes to, or substantial changes to a development by way of condition. If you don't know what the detail is in advance, again, this particular heritage concept context, it's not acceptable, let alone desirable, to have that matter left over to subsequent consideration.
So back in my paragraph 73, sir, it follows from what I've just been saying that this issue represents another aspect of the appeal proposals which can legitimately and properly
lead to a refusal of planning permission, given that the issue hasn't been satisfactorily resolved at this stage.
Moving on to your final issue, sir, whether the proposals materially undermine emerging and development plan policies. OMCI's principal submission under this head is that the guiding principle of good design, the policy of the development plan, and the emerging local plan haven't been reflected and complied with in the design of the appeal proposals. This point emerges
Both to the extent of the failure to comply with the guiding principles of the master plan, which I've dealt with above. I'm giving you another quote from it there. My submissions are the scheme is poorer in design terms as a result of its failure to meet the objectives of the master plan, having failed to take opportunities to improve the character and quality of the area and the way in which it functions. It's a critically important site which offers a unique opportunity to influence the future of Colchester's town centre. Achieving a high standard of design and the enhancement of the surrounding area are vital components to the delivery of the vision in the master plan. The appeal proposals wouldn't respect or enhance the surroundings and aren't of sufficient quality to deliver the vision aspired to in adopted or emerging policy, and therefore, as set out in the Northern Sentences of the proposal, are contrary to the numerous adopted and emerging policies which you list. For the avoidance of doubt, OMCI agrees with the Council's analysis of the tilted balance debate it's put forward in this particular cross-examination of Mr. Wrighton. In any event, and as was accepted by Mr. Wrighton, it is inconceivable that a deficit of housing land supply would somehow represent a reason for overriding heritage harm against such success. In many critical respects, the proposals are and remain unresolved, such as, say, what I've just been talking about as to what form the southern access might take, as to what's to happen to the severed remnant of the bus depot building, as to the treatment of the exposed elevation of 37 Queen Street, as to how the route behind the Curzon Cinema will function, having regard to the existing third-party rights of way enjoyed over it, and that's something amazingly not actually reviewed by the Essex County Council as part of the application process because it's unadopted highway.
Also, certain other resolved aspects, the extent of an accessible public
realm has emerged from the Section 106 session. I gather that's now sought to be resolved by the final version of the 106, but it's another area of doubt about the appeal proposal, chopping and changing. There's the extent to which the development will be car-free, although again now that's apparently been remedied by the inclusion of the appropriate no-car clause, which is going to come in the 106, which is being copied. Finally, sir, unresolved matters, there's the details of the final facade materials and treatments proposed to be left over by commission.
Now, so on Friday morning, the appellant made a yet further attempt to justify their substandard proposals in the form of Ms. Simpson's yet further rebuttal, which was put forward
seeking to allay concerns as to how the service access behind Curzon would function, given that it remains accessible by HGVs exercising third-party rights of way. Troublingly, sir, either this is an issue which the appellant was aware of but hadn't spelt out the solution to for the benefit of the inquiry, or, equally troublingly, it was just yet another aspect which the appellant hadn't thought through before OMCI's witness, Mr. Buist, pointed it out to them. But either way, sir, the prospect of HGVs passing and repassing, whether in forward or reverse gear, by the cafe table so shown on the drawings, is an alarming prospect indeed. Equally, sir, OMCI rejects entirely Ms. Simpson's late attempt to suggest that there's any degree of ambiguity or contradiction in the master plan in its references to access for disabled persons being an overriding consideration. The references she made, these latter references to maintaining access clearly relate to the town centre as a whole, which refers in the bit which I refer back to, having just said that accessibility for those cycling, walking and arriving by bus will be improved, but disabled access will be maintained. No ground for discerning any ambiguity or a degree of contradiction there. So my conclusion, sir, page 17. All in all, in my respectful submission, the appeal proposals represent a scheme which has been worked up to a point where officers of the council, and for some reason I say historic England, because I cite the reference there to the queries Ms. Ullman raised with them. So the appeal proposals worked up to a point where officers of the council and historic England were prepared to withdraw objections. But nevertheless, those proposals were far from exhibiting the quality which this very special appeal site demands. The attitude of the appellant, when faced with an obstacle to overcome, is summed up again by the quote I've already given. The another aspect of the proposal which we can't achieve, but then the appellants press on anyway with a materially suboptimal scheme. OMCI submits that the appellant scheme has been too much trammelled by the constraints, a word used time and again by Mr. Shields in his written law evidence, the constraints of the site, rather than realising the very special opportunities represented by the site. The appellant's approach would be, as a response, has led to a retrofitting of elements into the space available, resulting in a large, austere, institutional development that has more in common with the negative built elements of the area, rather than those which the consensus suggests. Rather than those which the consensus suggests for a high quality cultural quarter as exhibited in the master plan should reflect that and exhibit. There is a war raised in cross-examination that promoting a scheme such as this is a challenging prospect. However, if the scale of the development were reduced to a policy compliant level, the challenges significantly diminish and the current consequent over-development of the appeal site could be avoided. The appeal proposals are heavily influenced by the desire to include a substantial volume of student accommodation. This in turn has resulted in a predominance of four-storey blocks which challenge rather than complement the existing features of the conservation area. The combination of flat roofs, largely uniform design features and high buildings results in a monolithic presentation which is harmful to and out of character in conservation.
The proposed public spaces, such as John Hall's Square, are unresolved and fail to contribute to the master plan objectives of achieving place creation coupled with high levels of accessibility and permeability. The orientation and layout of the proposed buildings fails to realise the key view of the landmark visual art facility. The appellant's reliance on such a substantial element of student accommodation and the likely potential for inactive frontages at street level, these factors also combine to create a whole which would simply fail to realise the vision of a vibrant cultural quarter, which is what's needed and desired to ensure success of the regeneration of St. Botolph's quarter. Many of these failings are borne out in the observations of local interested parties, whose views were not taken on board in the appellant's designs, despite the appellants taking the opportunity to revisit the proposal before presenting the current appeal. OMCI maintains that the scheme as presented in this appeal is harmful to the conservation area, that there are no public benefits which the appeal proposals would bring with them, which could or would outweigh that harm. And therefore, sir, respectfully, on OMCI's behalf, I request that the appellant's appeal should be dismissed. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lewis.